Rule 10, be precise in your speech.
Okay. I have a lot of thoughts about this one.
Welcome back and happy Tuesday, turkeys. How long have we known each other?
We've known each other for 2 decades.
I am not apologizing for who I am or what I like or the people that I love.
How do I be a wife? How do I be a mom? And how do I be myself and all of that? You didn't see that coming, did you?
Good morning.
Good morning. Happy Tuesday. That's ugly. Hold on. Happy Tuesday, turkey tots. So gross. Don't judge my coffee.
If you're just listening, Kayla's Nespresso appears to have splooged on her cup a little bit, and it was facing me, and she didn't see it.
It was really gross looking. I'm sorry for everyone.
Full disclosure, I saw it when we were talking before we hit record, but I wanted you to see it in the natural form while we were talking.
Lovely. Well, anyway, good morning. Happy, everyone.
Happy day. Number one, I just want to say thank you to our dear friend One Dull Geek for his continued responses to our podcast.
I love it.
They're so thoughtful and nice. And I'm not going to read one right now because I'm going to spend half this podcast reading Jordan Peterson's quotes. But one of these days, I think we need to do a comment episode. Yeah. So he told us congratulations on 100, as did our YouTube buddy Frank.
Nice.
So also thank you, Frank, for your continued support and occasional trolling. Two very different energies in those two commenters. I appreciate them equally for very different reasons.
Exactly. I love that.
Oh. Also, I don't know. I'm going to just read the rule.
Do it. Let's hear it.
Okay. Rule 10, be precise in your speech.
Okay. I have a lot of thoughts about this one, and they're not bad. I'm just so confused. Okay, it's the academic in me, as in the lack of academic. Just 95% of the chapter, I was like, oh, this chapter title does not match what I'm listening to. Am I right? Or did I?
I don't know. Well, there's definitely some weaves, but the way that I sort of, when I finished it, the way I sort of felt like things were framed out was that the last chapter was talking about how to listen better. And this felt like the whole premise was how to verbally communicate better and the consequences of not.
I guess I'll say that I think I just had a predisposition and thought of what the chapter was going to be about. And it was just so not what I thought it was going to be about that the whole time I was like, where are we? However, correct.
You think this wait till you start next chapter.
Good, okay.
Because I started it last week, and let me tell you, did I know what was coming? No. I still don't really know what's going on. I'm sure it will come together at the end as it always does, but I can't wait to hear you next week. Okay, go ahead.
Well, anyway, by the end of the chapter, I'm like, oh, this is the point he's trying to make. Very different from where I thought we were going, but I got it, and I liked it, and it was a great chapter. It was just not lining up with my own pre-ideas of what it was going to be about. I set my expectations wrong, so that's on me.
I do sometimes start reading and just think, where are we going with these examples?
Great life examples, though. Great advice regardless.
Oh, yeah. I loved the part, well, we'll get into it, but I really liked his examples from marriage and communication and all of that.
Oh, yeah. Give us your summary.
Okay, summarization station. Excuse me. Okay, a summary. Life is complicated. Communication is hard. Last week we discovered new habits in the way we listen, and this week we focus on how to best speak so we can relay the information we need with efficacy. Dr. Peterson uses communication within marriage as a way to highlight the importance of precise speech, speaking up when a problem is noted, and the possible consequences if we push our feelings to the side. Once a problem is identified, it's time to formulate what we see as the issue, what we think is needed as a response, and not to dilly-dally around the matter with ambiguities. We are challenged to be vulnerable by expressing our thoughts completely. Identifying the problem can be scary. Admitting a situation isn't what we hoped it would be can be hard. But Dr. Peterson postulates that the alternative, willful ignorance, can lead to much harsher consequences. How does one fix a problem? Well, you need to know what the problem is first. And in order to identify the problem, you need to precisely describe the situation. Lastly, we are challenged to articulate our hopes, dreams, and goals specifically, because if our speech is vague, our goals will be vague, and then we will just be floating about.
I love it. I don't even
It
need
does
to read the
cover a
book. I
lot.
just listen to your summary. I'm just kidding. It's great though.
What was that called in school? Cliff Notes?
Oh, yes, that
When you
got me
didn't
by
want to
a
read the
lot of
book.
exams.
I wish audiobooks had existed when we were kids.
So much nicer.
I could have done all of my class reading while at my track practice.
Or anything.
Kids these days. They don't
So,
know.
back in our day,
When we had to carry around the textbook, the hard copy version of the textbook, and my backpack weighed 50 pounds and my straps were about to snap off.
which is funny because back then I was like, man, I've got back problems. And now I'm like, you did not have back problems, little child. You do now. No, I'm kidding. So, what are your thoughts on this chapter? Like, what were your biggest takeaways?
Well, my biggest takeaway was what I wrote in the summary, but no, I enjoyed the way he highlighted that speaking a problem is scary. So a lot of people will hang out and not speak to something that they see happening because it is a good point. That can be a vulnerable place if, especially within a relationship, to say, here's some things I'm noticing, especially, I don't know. I'm a lady, so that's the only experience I have. I imagine for men it can be hard because you might be afraid that people are going to assume you're a misogynistic jerk or something. But in my world, I'm like the peacekeeper a lot, or that was my habit growing up. So sometimes it can be hard to say something that might lead to a confrontation, although that's not so much a problem with strangers, much more difficult with family.
That makes sense. There's
I
more
mean,
emotion to it.
yeah, and part of it might just be like also a temper thing, but I did catch myself the other week, about a month ago, like yelling out the car window at someone who almost ran into it, like, or almost sideswiped us. Not my best moment. So I really enjoyed that part. I also really enjoyed him saying you have to be articulate in your goals to yourself so that you know where you're going. And if you want other people to hold you accountable in your pursuit of a goal, you have to be able to explain it precisely to them, or else they don't know how to support you. So if you don't know what you need and you can't ask for what you need and you can't explain to someone what you need, well, then you can't really expect them to be all that helpful.
Yeah. It reminded me, it felt like a parallel between the Do Not Lie chapter, because it's like, if your wife asks you, do you look fat? You know, say, I don't know what the example was, but say something that's the truth, but in a nice way, so that the trust is there and that she knows you. Like, basically, you're going to do more harm than good if you lie.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like, if you don't say something, almost like your ego is like, well, I'm just, I can handle anything and it's not a big of a deal and I'm fine. This is fine. It's not going to bother me at all. And then like 10 years of resentment builds up and then you find yourself in a worse situation. So I thought that was a really good point. It's like, be uncomfortable now and say something. Otherwise, it could snowball and lead to greater problems later.
Yeah, I liked that example a lot with the marriage
Mm-hmm.
one where he was talking. I think it was a wife. Yeah, it was a husband and wife, and the husband she had figured out was cheating on her. And he kind of walked it all the way back to when were there times that a discussion could have been had about dissatisfaction or being ambivalent? You know, when were these things starting to crop up? Because the current problem and sort of the whole deconstruction that happened was a crumbling of a foundation that happened over a long period of time. And he kind of goes in and examines how each person didn't speak precisely about the problem and how that led to the place that their relationship was, which is such a helpful example because so many people will just see the last incident or the straw that broke the camel's back and then make an immediate judgment about the character of the person that they assume to be in the wrong. Not excusing the behavior, but it's one of those things where if you back it up, you can, both parties need to say, what was my part, and evaluate that.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, let me start diving into some quotey toadies. Everything is intricate beyond imagining. Everything is affected by everything else. We perceive a very narrow slice of casually interconnected matrix, although we strive with all our might to avoid being confronted by knowledge of that narrowness. The thin veneer of perceptual sufficiency cracks, however, when something fundamental goes wrong. The dreadful inadequacy of our senses reveals itself. Everything we hold dear crumbles to dust. We freeze, we turn to stone. What do we see? Where can we look when it is precisely what we see that has been insufficient? Again, I don't know if that has, well, it's part of a bigger thing, but he just does make a good point. Problems are complicated and things are not as black and white as you think.
Correct.
And when someone, I guess, I don't know, if a friend comes to you and it's a friend and they're venting, I mean, you let them vent. But if somebody's asking you for advice, it behooves you to help them look at the bigger picture than to just hop on board with whatever their little slice of life is and just immediately endorse it.
Right, because again, everyone says, there's two sides or there's three sides to the story. You have to take everything with a grain of salt and realize that, and even like internal dialogue, what bias am I bringing to this? Like, what's my part, like you said, which is so hard.
Very hard. Next. Oh, this is in the little marriage bebop example, but I just really enjoyed this. There is little in a marriage that is so little that it is not worth fighting about. You're stuck in a marriage like the two proverbial cats in a barrel, bound by the oath that lasts in theory until one or both of you die. That oath is there to make you take the damn situation seriously. Do you really want the same petty annoyance tormenting you every single day of your marriage for decades of its existence?
That part, yeah.
His sense of humor kills me.
The way he reads it too is funny.
Oh, I believe it.
Oh yeah.
He's a snarky
love it.
fellow. I just really enjoyed this because it is a good reminder. I mean, I don't know. I guess take it with a grain of salt because there are things that my favorite example is Jason launching spoons into the sink from a distance. He's so rough on things. So he'll use a knife and then he'll like toss it into the sink and he makes it. It's not like stuff splattering all around. But sometimes if I'm overstimulated, it's very loud and I'm like, but I don't know. In that example, I make fun of him out loud. I'm like, you are so loud. Sometimes I feel like there's a me problem versus a him problem.
Right. And I do think he says that too. He's like, either say the problem and either like get your ass chewed out and be like, calm down, sit down and be okay with it. Or it'll lead to a conversation where it could change for the better between the two of you. I remember him saying, like, just because you do this doesn't also mean that you have to take responsibility. And sometimes you just need to chill the fuck out, basically. Which
I do
funny.
enjoy that he reminds you might not be right.
Yeah.
But it is so true. I think the marriage stuff he really boils down to not fighting where it's screaming or dysregulated emotional issues. That is not what he's referencing, I don't believe. But being able to have a confrontation and a discussion that might be uncomfortable is way bigger an investment into your marriage. And I would argue, which I think he does, that the people who give up on doing those things are kind of giving up on their relationship in a way. Like if you're not willing to fight for it, what are you doing?
That's a good way to look at it.
Okay. Well, okay, I'm going to read this again because this is him pulling apart his example with the infidelity. So again, just to put it into context, because I feel like otherwise the paragraphs sound weird, but I just really enjoyed the way he broke down the problem. Maybe a forthright conversation about sexual dissatisfaction might have been the proverbial stitch in time. Not that it would be easy. Perhaps Madame desired the death of intimacy clandestinely because she was deeply and secretly ambivalent about sex. God knows there's reason to be. Perhaps Monsieur was a terrible selfish lover. Maybe they both were. Sorting that out is worth a fight, isn't it? That's a big part of life, isn't it? Perhaps addressing that, and you never know, solving the problem would be worth 2 months of pure misery just telling each other the truth, not with intent to destroy or attain victory, because that's not the truth, that's just all-out war. Maybe it wasn't sex. Maybe every conversation between husband and wife had deteriorated into boring routine as no shared adventure animated the couple. Maybe that deterioration was easier moment by moment, day by day, than bearing the responsibility of keeping the relationship alive. Living things die, after all, without attention. Life is indistinguishable from effortful maintenance. No one finds a match so perfect that the need for continued attention and work vanishes. And besides, if you found the perfect person, he or she would run away from ever so imperfect you in justifiable horror. In truth, what you need, what you deserve after all, is somebody exactly as imperfect as you.
I love it. That is a good portion of that section, because that was the bulk of the chapter was that example, I feel like, and that's a good way to take it in. I like the living things die with no attention part.
And it's, to me, it's a way better way to describe the idea that people oversimplify and say relationships take work. Because we've talked about this so many times. That has such a negative connotation to me. And maybe that's just because I've never had my own business or some kind of work that was extremely invigorating. No offense to my current past jobs. But yeah, I just liked that. Attention, paying attention to something. It requires attention, and ignoring and neglecting is going to kill it.
Right. Even if you
And the
think
attention
in the
doesn't have
moment,
to, yeah.
it's going to like be better. Like, I don't want to bug them with this, so I'm just going to keep to myself.
I mean, the best example I can think of for myself was going to therapy. It was not a fun year of just everything being out and raw and digging through shit. And I was just like, the other end of it, so much better. I am so much more emotionally regulated. I would have done 2 years of slogging through the shit if it meant I could come out on the other side feeling more in control of my emotions and my overall well-being. And then, it's the mini version of working out. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't pay attention to your body and invest in your body, and then you can be uncomfortable for an hour in the morning, or you can be uncomfortable all day.
Yeah. And for the rest of your life. Yeah.
Okay. I wrote bra next to this, so it's probably good.
Okay.
Or I was just really into it that day. If I ever loan this book to somebody and they see that I've written bra next to his writing, okay. Why avoid when avoidance necessarily and inevitably poisons the future? Because the possibility of a monster lurks underneath all disagreements and errors. Maybe the fight you are having or not having with your wife or husband signifies the beginning of the end of your relationship. Maybe your relationship is ending because you are a bad person. It's as likely, at least in part, isn't it? Having the argument necessary to solve a real problem therefore necessitates willingness to confront two forms of miserable and dangerous potential simultaneously. Chaos, the potential fragility of the relationship, of all relationships and of life itself, and hell, the fact that you and your partner could each be the person bad enough to ruin everything with your laziness and spite. There's every motivation to avoid, but it doesn't help. Why remain vague when it renders life stagnant and murky? Well, if you don't know who you are, you can hide in doubt. Maybe you're not bad, careless, worthless person. Who knows? Not you. Particularly if you refuse to think about it, and you have every reason not to. But not thinking about something you don't want to know about doesn't make it go away. You are merely trading specific, particular, pointed knowledge of the likely finite list of your real faults and flaws for a much longer list of undefined potential inadequacies and insufficiencies.
Bruh. Totally.
Right? It was that line, but not thinking about something you don't want to know about doesn't make it go away.
Yeah, dude. This listening to you reread it back reminds me of just everyone's on this, what do they call it? Hamster wheel. I'm picturing someone just walking down the street. Like, everyone's just like, go, 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 9 to 5. Here's my schedule. Here's my routine. And everyone's kind of just floating. It's like an NPC. I feel like people are so inundated mentally that we don't know how to actually think to ourselves. We don't know how to process our thoughts. We don't know how to navigate things and know ourselves. And so I think people just ignore it. And it's almost like a rain slicker, just the rain, thoughts just wash off. And we don't have any like mental space to think things through. That's how I feel when you just read that back. I was like, I'm guilty of that too.
It's so easy. I really liked how he reframed it though to say, if you just would know what your flaws are and know what you're working with, that's a finite list versus not knowing and having it be this amorphous blob of everything that could be wrong. Exactly. Like, wouldn't you rather know what's wrong than what could be wrong? It's a much smaller list.
Well, then I think he goes into like the health stuff. It's like, if you have this tumor or this bump on your body, I don't know if that was the exact example. It's like, it could be a myriad of things. It could be just a little thing that's going to go away, or it could be a really bad thing. Like, until you know, you don't know, and you should probably find out, even if you don't want to find out because it's scary, but also like, you got to take action. So,
yeah, and
you can't ignore it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this reminded me, I didn't note it in the summary, but he has that little anecdote of the dragon or the monster.
Yes. I've never heard that story.
Me either. But the kid says, Mom, there's a monster in the house or there's a dragon in the house. And at this point, it's little and the size of a shoe. And she's just keeps saying, no, no, it's not there. It's not there. And it keeps growing and growing and growing until eventually I think it's busting out the seams of the whole house. And eventually everyone else in the family is telling the mom, no, there is a thing here. You have to acknowledge that this thing is here. And when she does, then it shrinks back down to its small size. But it's so true. If you avoid and avoid, it just gets bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at one point he was like sweeping things under the rug, letting the dragon gain a few more pounds. I'm like, oh, I hate it.
I know, I do too. I hate it so much. Okay. Why refuse to specify when specifying the problem would enable its solution? Because to specify the problem is to admit that it exists. Because to specify the problem is to allow yourself to know what you want, say, from friend or lover, and then you will know precisely and cleanly when you don't get it, and that will hurt, sharply and specifically. But you will learn something from that and use what you learn in the future. And the alternative to that single sharp pain is the dull ache of continued hopelessness and vague failure and the sense that time, precious time, is slipping by. Why refuse to specify? Because while you are failing to define success and thereby rendering it impossible, you are also refusing to define failure to yourself, so that if and when you fail, you won't notice and it won't hurt, but that won't.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, so really some knives to the gut, man.
That is, I don't even know how to respond to that. And he says it so eloquently. Anything I say is going to sound silly, but it's so true.
It's the same principle of not trying something new for risk of failure or because you won't be immediately good at it. Very guilty of.
Me too. Me too.
I feel like I'm getting better. I sometimes see old clips pop up from our podcast on places, and every once in a while I'll go back and look at them, the on this day things.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them make me giggle. Some of them make me want to die. But again, I'm glad they make me want to die because then it means that we've gotten better.
Right. We wouldn't be here, which there's still so much more room, but we wouldn't be here if we didn't go through that. So it's like you kind of have to just...
You do. And if we hadn't ever started because we wanted it to be perfect, we still would never have started.
No, we would still be talking about it and not doing it.
This has been a very good shock to the system of me wanting to be good at everything, because not only did we continue to have room for improvement, but it's documented and I have to revisit it.
And everyone can see it.
I'm like, woof. Okay. When things fall apart and chaos reemerges, we can give structure to it and reestablish order through our speech. If we speak carefully and precisely, we can sort things out and put them in their proper place and set a new goal and navigate to it. Often communally, if we negotiate, if we reach consensus. If we speak carelessly and imprecisely, however, things remain vague. The destination remains unclaimed, the fog of uncertainty does not lift, and there is no negotiating through the world. It's so helpful.
So helpful.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna, let me just blast through a couple of these because they're good, and then we can chat some more. Okay, the problem itself must be admitted to and close to the time of its emergence as possible. I'm unhappy is a good start, not I have a right to be unhappy, because that is still quite questionable at the beginning of the problem-solving process. Perhaps your unhappiness is justified under the current circumstances. Perhaps any reasonable person would be displeased and miserable to be where you are. Alternatively, perhaps you are just whiny and immature. Consider both, at least equally probable, as terrible as such consideration might appear. Just exactly how immature might you be? There's a potentially bottomless pit, but at least you might rectify it if you can admit to it.
Oh my gosh.
It's a very good point.
It is great.
We often don't like to, we do like to put on a blinder so we don't have to look at our potential faults and just talk about everybody else's.
It's the easy thing to do.
So it's kind of fun. This is a good quote. It is very difficult to put such things in order, but damaged machinery will continue to malfunction if its problems are neither diagnosed nor fixed.
I like that. That was a good, simple way to put it.
It's that insanity is the definition of doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
If your car's making a weird noise, you should probably take it in, because if you don't take it in, 3 months later, you're going to be stuck on the side of the road or something.
Yeah. Literally just did this in my life. And I was so tempted to just avoid the problem because I didn't want to face the potential problem of having to pay for a new transmission. Okay. Be careful with what you tell yourself and others about what you have done, what you are doing, and where you are going. Search for the correct words. Oh, and then this was in reference to that dragon example. Don't hide baby monsters under the carpet. They will flourish. They will grow large in the dark. Then, when you least expect it, they will jump out and devour you. You will descend into an indeterminate, confusing hell instead of ascending into heaven of virtue and clarity. Courageous and truthful words will render your reality simple, pristine, well-defined, and habitable. 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 Oops. So real test. Okay. I'm sorry for all this reading, but this is the end of the chapter, and this is where he sums everything up so succinctly. So we just have to, and then I'll shut up. Okay. You have to consciously define the topic of a conversation, particularly when it is difficult or it becomes about everything and everything is too much. If that's not a guide to having an argument, I don't know what is. This is so frequently why couples cease communicating. Every argument degenerates into every problem that ever emerged in the past, every problem that exists now, and every terrible thing that is likely to happen in the future. No one can have a discussion about everything. Instead, you can say, this exact precise thing, that is what is making me unhappy. This exact precise thing, that is what I want as an alternative, although I am open to suggestions if they are specific. This exact precise thing, that is what you could deliver so that I will stop making your life and mine miserable. But to do that, you have to think, what is wrong exactly? What do I want exactly? You must speak forthrightly and call forth habitable world from chaos. You must use honest speech to do that. If instead you shrink away, hide what you are hiding from, will transform itself into the giant dragon that lurks under your bed and in your forest and in the dark recesses of your mind, and it will devour you. You must determine where you have been in your life so that you can know where you are now.
Bruh, you should put bruh again on the side.
I'm going to have to make a bruh graphic. You must determine where you are going in your life because you cannot get there unless you move in that direction. Random wandering will not move you forward. It will instead disappoint and frustrate you and make you anxious and unhappy and hard to get along with, and then resentful, and then vengeful, and then worse. Say what you mean so that you can find out what you mean. Act out what you say so you can find out what happens. Then pay attention. Note your errors, articulate them, strive to correct them. That is how you discover the meaning of your life. That will protect you from the tragedy of your life. How could it be otherwise? Confront the chaos of being, take aim against a sea of troubles, specify your destination, chart your course, admit to what you want, tell those around you who you are, narrow and gaze attentively, and move forward forthrightly.
Mm-hmm. I like that. That was the last couple pages where I was like, oh yeah, this is what this chapter's meaning.
He gives an example too, I think it's in this chapter that I really enjoyed, where he says, it's the common trope of men want to talk about the problem. Was that last chapter? Men want to solve the problem and women want to talk about the problem.
I think that was last chapter.
Okay. They all kind of tied in together, but it reminded me of that a little bit. The same concept of don't be so fast to try to just quick solve the problem. Mm-hmm. It's probably avoiding the discomfort of defining the issue, which needs to happen first.
Correct. Yes. You can't take down this big thing without piecing through the actual individual things that have created this big thing. Yeah. I love it.
I also really enjoyed the part about being untethered and wandering around, because I think I really felt that in my early 20s. It just felt so floopy. Yeah. To quote Phoebe from Friends.
I still think so many people go through life just like untethered too, but it's not that they're, I don't know, it's just even some days I go through my days and I'm like, where am I mentally? Like, I don't know where I am because I'm just going through, and I feel like there's some emotional unavailability that has transcended into myself that I would like to work through, because sometimes I don't feel like I'm attached. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So this chapter was like, ooh, you need to pay attention to that.
Yeah. And I think sometimes you will go through the motions, but if you have your attention fixed on a point on the horizon in the future and you're headed that way, then the rote routine of the day-to-day, it gives it meaning. Right. Again, you're not just doing something aimlessly.
Right.
Because I feel like, especially in your situation with having a young kid and working, I mean, there's just going to be times where it's like there's just things you have to get done and you're going to be tired and there's motions you have to go through. But if you can keep your sights fixed on whatever your end goal is, or have something that's kind of a North Star, then it feels purposeful.
Yeah.
Even if the
exactly.
day-to-day tasks feel boring.
Mundane and
Yeah. I just really like that he pointed out that the lack of a purpose can make you feel anxious. I think that is so true. And I think a lot of people that are our age and younger feel really anxious. And I sometimes think some of that is because there's not a defined goal. And because a lot of stuff feels really uncertain with the economy and, going through whatever the normal steps of life are seem really difficult and different than generations past. But again, if you don't define what you want and say what you want and not be afraid to say that, then you can't even begin to get there.
Exactly.
Last thing, this also reminded me of just even the vulnerability of saying I want to do a podcast. Like just saying what you want to do out loud. Sometimes you don't want to because it sounds embarrassing and you don't want people to react.
I know.
So maybe don't tell some people. Like maybe start off with your trusted people when you're talking about growing a dream, but you've got to say it out loud at some point.
Yep.
Or it's never going to come into fruition.
Correct. And then, the people that can hold you accountable will be like, well, you said you want to do this, so do it.
Right?
Crazy.
I have a weird crick in my neck. Well, what? I was going to say, what's my tip this week, but I didn't really pre-formulate one.
Well, I'll tell you one as our conversation has been evolving. We've said this a couple times, but I feel like the tip of the week is go to therapy. I'm also talking to myself. There's so many options now. You could do it online. I don't know, but there's apps and there's things that are less expensive, or you could go in. Like, there's so many different forms of therapy. I think it's a great place to start if you feel like you need to sift through some of this stuff.
Yeah. My favorite thing about it is that you're talking to someone that has no emotional investment in you or your life, and they don't have a history with you. So unless they're an extremely unwell therapist, they're not going to get butt hurt. So you can kind of say wild shit and sort of test it out and throw it out there and see what sticks. And you don't have to worry about saying something that offends your partner and then having to manage their feelings while you're still just trying to figure out what your feelings are.
Exactly.
And then once you build the skills of being precise in your speech, it'll be easier to do that with other people. But it's nice to have a low-risk environment to do that in.
Exactly. Can you say the chapter for next week real quick?
Probably not before the music gets loud. But you should let children play while they're skateboarding. Next week, Rule 11. Do not bother children while they are skateboarding.
There we go. Love you, bye.
That was the energy I was trying for. Love you, bye.